If you're like me and everybody in the world, constant interruptions are a part of every day. Now, maybe they're not wanted. Maybe you wish they just didn't happen. But the reality is, interruptions are going to come and go through our day, every day, and it's how we respond to them, how we get better with them, how we learn to use them or utilize them to our advantage that really can help us be our best version of ourselves. And here's the thing, there's a couple of things that can really help you. Today I'm gonna go over 4, and if you hang on to the end of the video, I'm actually gonna give a bonus idea. And the bonus idea could be actually your number 1. To me, it's something I use all the time, but I'm gonna start with the 4 that are mandatory, foundational. And the first foundational idea is crazy. It's number 1 is acknowledging that they're going to happen. Why is this important? You gotta know that interruptions are gonna be a part of your day, but if you know that they are and you acknowledge it might happen, you're not surprised. See, the emotional response that you have to the interruption can sometimes derail all of the time that you were setting aside for whatever the action you were trying to complete was. See, emotional responses to anything can derail success at every corner. Emotion is something that you cannot maybe control as well as you'd like, but by acknowledging that it's gonna happen and knowing that it's likely, we get better at it. I'll give you an example. I know every single day I'm going to be interrupted at certain times. In fact, sometimes I tell people on our team that you will not get time on our schedule without interruptions. And during those interruptions, it's okay because I'll get to them when I can, but acknowledging they're going to come in is the first part of the battle. I've gotta know that they're gonna come in. And I've gotta be aware so that I don't emotionally get derailed. And you know, there are times in my career, long time ago, where you set aside this time to be successful and then you're constantly getting hammered with interruptions. And it's very challenging. But when you learn to acknowledge it, it's almost like this step forward that, okay, it's just gonna happen. It's gonna happen and we're gonna work through it together. The second thing that I find extremely important, and it goes with acknowledging it, is the team. Having the right team around you. So this is great in work, this is great in anything you do. It could be outside of work, be volunteer work. I don't care what you're doing. If you acknowledge that interruptions are gonna come and you have the right team to help you handle them, it's amazing how successful you can deal with these constant interruptions. See, in my world, several years ago, I had no EA. I had no person to actually help me. For the first 14 years of my career, I had someone all the time and then had 2 people working directly with us as a team for 8 of those 14 years. Then I went about 3 to 4 without anybody. And it was distracting, difficult, challenging, and it was almost like I had forgotten how I operate best. Once I hired the right human to help manage all the things that happen in the day, to help organize all of the scheduling, to gather all the data and help me be prepared every single day, better prepared than I was even before, it's amazing how constant interruptions became something that you can deal with. Because here's what you've learned. When you have the right operations and systematic processes and human that's managing them, they're making sure everything that comes to you is already kind of sifted through this colander of crazy. So by the time it gets to me, I know that it probably needs to be dealt with. And the reality is having that right team is valuable. Here's the other reason it's valuable. It's not just that one person. It's the rest of the team and knowing that there are leaders on the team that can actually handle things so that the challenges and the interruptions become less and less and less. The more your team has the power, accountability, and faith of you in them to succeed, the more they're going to get things done and not put it on your plate. And if it's not coming to you, you're less likely to get interrupted. This is a very valuable lesson when it comes to teams. Teams are always going to be a part of a great leader. Teams are always going to be part of someone that's trying to be successful. But knowing how you can be successful within that team can be extremely valuable. I'll give you another example. I love discipline. I love systems and processes. I'm not always the best at organizing them for myself, but I'm great at working within a team on them. If I can talk through an idea with one person, I can gather all the data, all the success. I can actually work through it in my brain, and I now know the path forward. And the other person's job is to help me execute upon it. And by putting the parameters and barriers in my day to be most successful, that person's done that for me. And it's not just that one person, it's also the rest of the team and how they're organizing theirs. So acknowledging that interruptions are going to come is the first thing. And the success of your team is also predicated by your success with these constant interruptions, because the more empowered they are, the less likely you'll be interrupted. And the more you build your team around them and you, the more successful you're going to be. The next most important thing, especially if you've now acknowledged and you've garnered the right team, is you got to qualify and prioritize. Qualifying an interruption is probably the most important thing that you could do. Now, how hard is it to qualify something when you're emotional? So if you go all the way back to number one and you haven't acknowledged that these interruptions are going to happen, it's really difficult to qualify and prioritize because you're too busy getting frustrated. If you're getting frustrated that interruptions have come in, you can't do step three. Step three is qualify and prioritize for a reason. Is it a now important decision? Is it a later important decision? Or is it a delegation? So it's now, later, delegate. So you're qualifying and prioritizing. Prioritizing the now means, hey, I have to take a quick step back, think, pause and think, actually. Pause, think, process. Pause, think, process. Why is that important? Because now I've just identified this interruption as something that has to happen now. So pause gives me a breath. Think gives me thought process. Do I have all the data? And process allows me to make that decision. That is so important to being interrupted. And I've lived in interruptions most of my life and my career, and I kind of like them. Deep down, I don't mind interruptions, but I love to be focused and I love to be disciplined and I love the success that comes from that type of work. I just don't mind a distraction here and there. And a lot of people with ADHD, a lot of people with high energy actually enjoy a little bit of the distraction. And what you have to be careful of is that it's not derailing you. So if it's derailing you and you haven't prioritized and qualified it as now, later, or delegate, then you can get caught up in the whole interruption, and that could become a bigger issue. So this also helps to organize the interruption. This is the organizational step. This is the one that's key and crucial once you've acknowledged and you know your team has done everything they can. It's come to you, so you move it. You move it to the next space. Now, later, delegate. And I think that's a really crucial step to this entire process. Four is key. Find pockets in your day where you can welcome the interruptions. I know that sounds crazy, a little stupid, but it's not. There are times and pockets in your day where you're going to have gaps. Those are times for interruptions. Maybe that's the later portion. Maybe that's the delegate portion. Maybe the delegate portion requires you to talk to someone and actually go through that interruption that hit you earlier. Maybe you know you're going to be interrupted, so you want to hit it early. And when you see you have a 15-minute gap earlier in the day, later in the day, whenever it's going to be, let's go ahead and just pigeonhole that spot for that interruption. Quick call. This morning, right before the videos, I was getting ready to film these, and I knew I had about a 10-minute interruption that was mandatory. There was an emergency. It wasn't a horrible emergency, but it was an emergency that needed operations support. I needed to make a couple of decisions. I allotted 10 minutes in between. We started 5 minutes late, and it worked out. It wasn't the end of the world. But by handling that interruption now, I also allowed it not to spiral into a bigger interruption later in the day. So by having the ability to have that pocket just before we started, I was able to solve multiple problems. Identified it as now. I acknowledged it was going to happen, which was first. Second was my team couldn't handle this. They did the best they could already. This was qualified as a now. And then I had to actually create the pocket. The pocket was within the next 15 minutes. And we solved it. And we got through it. And now there's an action plan and steps to execute upon that interruption. Now, how does this affect us in daily life, right? It's not always going to be this perfect. In a business setting, we can define this as how you do it. If you're the principal of a school, you can execute upon this. If you are a leader of a company or an executive leader in a company, you can apply these 4 things. But the reality is interruptions come in our personal life as well. And I think acknowledging it and going through the steps as I just did also helps you in your personal life, because it's usually where we have the least patience. I can tell you right now, if you're being interrupted by somebody in a work environment, you probably have just a little bit more patience for them than someone in your household interrupting you, because it's very, very challenging. Let's say you're taking that afternoon nap that you feel that you deserve and have warranted all week, and you get interrupted constantly. You're not gonna love it. You don't wanna acknowledge it. So there might be a trick to this, and the trick is the bonus item. The bonus item that I'm going to give you, 5, and maybe it's your number 1, is this. This can help with personal interruptions, professional interruptions, and any constant interruptions. And it's, when are you going to be most successful in your day? When is your high focus time? You have to establish and identify when you're going to be most successful and when you're going to be least likely to be interrupted. During a 24-hour period, what is the least likely time you'll be interrupted? If you're a new mom or dad, guess what? You're probably going to be interrupted all night long by your children. It's going to happen. It's probably not going to be a good high priority time for you, right? For me, I found high success with early morning time. I start my day slow. I talk about it all the time, but I do so because I've conditioned the team. I even know when the family's going to be most active. When I have most alone time is going to be first thing in the morning. That's when I'm going to get my high priority, guaranteed focus time done. And occasionally late at night. But for me, I know that's most likely. Once I get into the office, it's probably not going to be as likely. What is your high success time? What is your high focus time? When are you going to be able to get the most done in that time? And that sounds so simple, but I can't tell you how many times I've asked that question and people don't know the answer. There is a high focus time for you. And if you look at yourself and how you could be most successful and identify that time and then guard it with your life, you will be amazed at how much more productive you'll be. And you'll be amazed at how much more prepared you are for the rest of those interruptions throughout the day. If I get my morning and I have the time that I allot every single day, even if it's a smaller pocket, I allot it every single day. If I have that time, I succeed better throughout the day. And I think you will too. So if this sounds like it's something you need to move to number 1, high focus time, then move it to number 1. Then acknowledge it. Then go through the steps. But I can tell you, we're all gonna have constant interruptions in our lives. The quicker we acknowledge it and move through the process, the more successful we'll all be. Thanks for watching. Like, share, comment. Tell us why this video matters to you and help us get the word out. And if you like videos like this, watch this next.